Chainsaw Man Part 2 is very strange to me. Don't get me wrong, I like it. I think I like it just as much as Part 1, although that's very hard to say because it's for very different reasons. When I finished Part 1, I pretty much felt the exact same way as I did when I finished any other series that I absolutely loved. It was a great story, I had a shit ton of fun with it, I was shocked by the things that happened, and it had a huge impact on me. But with Part 2, it's very different. It's been more than 2 months since the last chapter came out, and my god, I've been thinking about it constantly. And again, it's not for the same reasons that I did with Part 1. Whenever I looked back on the series and what it did in Part 2, it felt like I was wrestling with it, like it was trying its best to frustrate me as much as possible and to get me to hate it. And yet for every single criticism that I could give and that I heard people give, even though I thought, yeah, the characters are kind of underdeveloped, the story is very messy, and the structure is very weird. A lot of the character deaths fall flat and are, again, very unsatisfying. And Denji's character is extremely frustrating. And yet for some reason, I can't really think of those as flaws. Like, no matter how much I try to pick at it and really try to think about why I even like it in the first place, I can't really pinpoint it. I mean, I can kind of pinpoint it, but I don't fucking know. I literally invented an entire, 5 pillars of storytelling for the sake of trying to categorize Chainsaw Man Part 2, for the sake of trying to file it away in a certain place of my mind that I could do so with every other story that I loved. And yet, even with that, I still can't really. And that's not necessarily to say that the story is bad for not fitting into my own made-up arbitrary rules for storytelling. It more so just means that it falls completely outside it. This video is made for me to just get my thoughts across. I'm not here to convince you of anything. If you didn't like the ending of Chainsaw Man Part 2, or if you didn't like Chainsaw Man Part 2 as a whole, then that's great. You're allowed to like and dislike things. I'm not trying to criticize you for it. But at the end of the day, this is just art, and just because you didn't like a piece of art, it doesn't mean that it's bad. And just because I like a piece of art, it doesn't mean that it's good. Because at the end of the day, the concept of good and bad art is completely subjective. No matter how many rules and guidelines you try to set, at the end of the day, it's all fucking pointless. Stories are made for people to make stories. We're not architects trying to make the perfect structure that will stand the test of time and be there for hundreds of years. We're just people that want to get our thoughts across in cool and interesting ways. Chainsaw Man Part 1 and Part 2 are fundamentally different stories, specifically in the way that they are written. Also, obviously, spoilers for Part 2 of Chainsaw Man, for the entirety of Chainsaw Man, literally up until the final chapter. So if you care about that, fucking get out! Now, I am gonna talk about these 5 pillars that I've made. There are plenty of frameworks on the internet about how to write a story. Like, there's the 4 foundational pillars of storytelling that are characters, setting, plot, and conflict. There's also this book that I've seen on the internet about the 7 pillars of storytelling. Stuff like, overcoming the monster, rags to riches, voyage and return, the quest, comedy, tragedy, blah. Don't get me wrong, these story structures are very useful, especially if you're a beginner. It can help you gain a start with writing stories, and it can also help you analyze others. But at the end of the day, these pillars were not made to write stories off of, they were made to explain why certain stories work and certain stories don't. People have been making stories for as long as humanity has existed. There used to be no structure to these things. People just made stories about things that they wanted to write about. They just made art, and then people from the future looked at these stories and thought, why does this resonate with me, and yet the others don't? Once you've written enough stories and also consumed enough stories, you can make whatever goddamn structure you want. For me, the structure of a story works like this. There is plot, atmosphere, characters, theme expression, and identity. Plot is obviously the things that happen, the events themselves. And then there's atmosphere, which is basically the overall vibe of the story. And this actually depends on many different things. It depends on the music, it depends on the setting, it depends on the cinematography, or if you're making a comic, it depends on panel layout, the composition, and also just the art quality itself, sound effects. Even the art style is important for atmosphere. Then there's the characters, which I don't have to explain shit. Then there's themes. What is the author trying to say? What question are they asking? What message are they preaching? Is there social commentary? And then there's identity, which is a bit of a weird one. Usually, at least for me, identity really depends on how the other pillars line up. It's more of a culmination of everything rather than its own pillar. Then again, there are certain stories that kind of are driven by identity alone. Stuff like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, or the Yakuza games, or really any Tatsuki Fujimoto story. People don't watch the next JoJo part because they think, whoa, the setting is so interesting. Whoa, the characters. Yes, those are things that ultimately do come together to make it really good. But at the end of the day, the thing that makes people wanna watch JoJo's is its identity. It's the fact that it's JoJo's. You watch JoJo's because you wanna see what fucked up shit Araki is trying to write. You watch it because there's nothing else like it. Now, again, I'm not trying to tell you that this is the correct framework and that you should use it for everything else that you write and analyze. This is just what I've come up with after like 5 years of writing and drawing and watching shit. It's completely arbitrary, but it does help me understand why certain stories stick with me. Now, there are some stories that actually find a really good balance in between all of these pillars. But the truth is, most writers are not going to do this. Not everybody has the technical skill that it takes to balance everything out. Most writers will sacrifice pillars. But the thing that makes stories that are very unbalanced still stick with people is that through sacrificing one or more pillars, they reinforce the rest. Frieren pretty much has a non-existent plot. Sure, there are certain arcs that have technically a plot, but the vast majority of the series is basically a slice of life. But it's because the author has sacrificed plot that it actually has more time to develop characters and to reinforce atmosphere. Frieren has some of the best character writing in anime, because that's what it focuses on, and that's exactly how somebody without the technical skill of balancing every single pillar can still make a story that impacts people. Another example, Blood Meridian, one of my favorite stories of all time. That story pretty much has no plot. Again, technically there's no story that has absolutely no plot, but the plot is not the thing that you're watching for. And it's also not the characters. Sure, there's Judge Holden, and he's literally one of the best villains ever written in fiction ever, but the rest of the characters, I mean, they're not that interesting, to be honest. Like, most of them I don't even remember their names, except for like Glanton. Pretty much all the characters in Blood Meridian are just caricatures, stereotypes. For fuck's sake, the protagonist is named The Kid, and then later, The Man. He has no name. And there's also not really that much characterization to him, since a lot of the events of the story that are very important, the kid's just not there. Well, he is there, but the narrator doesn't say anything about what he's doing. However, it's through the sacrifice of plot and characters that the atmosphere, themes, and identity are especially strengthened. The world of Blood Meridian is one of carnage and complete desensitization to violence and cruelty. It's Cormac McCarthy's fears for society taken to the absolute extreme. And the thing that actually makes the lackluster characterization kinda genius in a way is the fact that it makes sense in this specific world. These characters are underdeveloped because the world that they live in has completely rid them of identity. Nobody has any philosophy to speak of, except the judge. They don't really have any goals or aspirations or really anything to live for. It's all just carnage and violence. If the characters were better developed, it would actually kind of take away from what McCarthy was ultimately trying to say. That a world so desensitized to violence will strip you of anything that makes you human. It will strip you of identity, philosophy, and compassion. It's through sacrificing two entire pillars that it actually reinforces the other three to the point where the story becomes one of the most well written ever. Are there people who don't like it? Yeah. I'd say most people who have read this absolutely hate it, because not everybody prefers the same pillars. Some people like the plot better. Some people don't want characters to be sacrificed. Now, Chainsaw Man is doing something kinda similar. One of the big critiques of part 2 is that a lot of the side characters are very underdeveloped. Now, I've already explained with Blood Meridian why that can actually work in the story's favor. So how does it work in Chainsaw Man's favor? Well, what is the biggest theme of Chainsaw Man Part 2? The biggest thematic through line that connects everything. It's loneliness, and how constant stimulation and addiction will keep you away from connection. Now in part 2, the only characters that are like really well developed are Asa and Denji. Well, Denji's a bit unique, but you know, I'm gonna talk about him. Pretty much all the rest of the characters, while they are likable and they are well written, they're not as well developed as the side characters in part 1. However, I feel like that's intentional, and even if it's not, I think it still fits within what Chainsaw Man Part 2 is trying to say, or trying to make you feel. Denji is so numb, so broken, and completely disconnected from other people that it actually makes the narrative reflect that. Denji doesn't want to get close with anyone. He doesn't want to know anyone for real. Yeah, he wants sex, he wants connection, but he doesn't want to get close to people because the entirety of part 1 and just Makima as a whole has made him link true connection with control and destruction of his life. Apart from Pochita, the only two true connections that he's had with people were completely taken away from him. And not because of some freak accident or some outside force. No, the very person that brought them to his life, that made him love these people, also took them away. So now, anytime that he does feel that bit of connection, he completely rejects it, because that's his defense mechanism. And so this reflects onto the side characters and their writing, with the story not giving them the attention that they deserve because Denji doesn't give them the attention that they deserve. And this isn't the first time that Chainsaw Man has done this too. Part 1 does this all the time with Makima. Makima is a groomer. She's an extremely uncomfortable archetype to write. And if this were any other story, she would have been presented in a way that made her very obviously evil. But Tatsuki Fujimoto doesn't do that. He wants us to live in Denji's mind. He wants us to really feel Denji's perspective. And sure, from an outside view, Makima's hold on Denji is very uncomfortable and very obviously manipulative. But from Denji's perspective, this is the best thing that he's ever experienced. An attractive woman giving him so much attention, promising him things that, at least to Denji, resemble true connection, like sex and touching titties. To Denji, who's pretty much never had a mother figure in his life, this is heaven. Even after Makima dies by the hands of Denji himself, he still genuinely believes that he loves her. And this is exactly how the story presents Makima as well, especially in the anime, with the scenes where Makima is manipulating Denji appearing serene and comforting, like you're watching a true relationship form, not because it is happening, but because that's how Denji sees it. So what I'm saying is, Fujimoto sacrificed the character pillar because it was in service of his atmosphere and themes. And this sacrificing of pillars can pretty much be felt, or at least I pretty much feel it, in every flaw and technical problem that part 2 has. The story feels aimless because Denji's life is completely aimless, with Denji's progression being really messy and cyclical, with him having multiple moments of clarity followed by him going right back to being a sex-obsessed ape. In fact, you know what? Let's talk about that. Another big problem that people have with Chainsaw Man Part 2 is, well, Denji himself. Now, some people think that this is because people don't understand Denji, that they don't get what the author is trying to say with him. His cyclical characterization is actually the point. Yes, I fully agree with that. But I can also completely understand why for some people this may seem like a very exhausting and just not a fun way to write a story, and just not a very compelling story to read for this many chapters. So again, if you didn't like this part of the story and you didn't like Denji's characterization, fucking yeah, I can't blame you. I can understand why somebody may see this and even understand why it's made like this, and also think, I am not engaged by this. This is just frustrating. However, for me personally, it's very engaging. I like stories where characters feel like real people, even if they are extremely frustrating. It's not compelling for most people, but for me, it is hella compelling. But I'm also gonna go a bit further onto the ending. There's people who absolutely hate the ending, and again, I cannot blame them. It's a very Tatsuki Fujimoto ending. You know, the type of ending where he's like, I don't give a shit about storytelling rules, I don't give a shit about what people think, I'll just write what I want. Which can really describe his entire writing career, but I'm gonna try my best to explain why it's not just a satisfying ending or an okay ending, and why I actually think it's a pretty great ending. Now, the biggest message of Chainsaw Man overall, especially in part 1, is that deep, true connections with people will change you. Denji starts out part 1 being a sex-obsessed ape. He wants connection, but doesn't really know what connection means. So his brain defaults to the most primal thing: sex, titties, boobies. He works hard to touch Power's boobs. He's left completely unsatisfied because the thing he was searching for was just not there. In the back of his mind, he genuinely thought that touching boobs will solve a big part of his life, and so when it was just kinda nothing, you can understand why he's so fucked up about it. And then of course, Himeno's like, hey Denji, if you kill this devil, I'll kiss you with tongue. Yeah! So then he kills the devil, gets the kiss. Oh god. Once again, this thing that he was searching for turned out to be not only nothing, but also pretty fucking awful. Now this does kinda continue, but there's a specific moment after the global assassinations arc where Makima asks Denji if he wants to go on a trip with her. The trip that Denji has been wanting for a long time. It's especially sweet now since Makima says, just the two of us. And normally, Denji would still take that trip with Makima. I mean, he almost does. But the thing that makes him refuse it is his connections with Aki and Power. In his mind, it's as simple as Power is traumatized and I want to help her. It's really subtle, but it means a lot. So we've seen Denji having moments of clarity multiple times throughout part 1 and still make the same mistake. And the one thing that actually made him no longer make that mistake was this deep and familial connection. Now you look at part 2, where all of his connections have been completely severed and destroyed. So who's going to stop him from making the same mistakes over and over and over again? Sure, Nayuta kinda helped him for a bit, but honestly I would argue that Denji and Nayuta's relationships was never as close as most people think. Don't get me wrong, I do believe Denji genuinely cared for Nayuta and genuinely loved her. Fucking hell, he lets Pochita out and decapitates Barum when he finds out she died. But when Asa asks him why he still keeps going, why he doesn't give up, he doesn't say, it's because I want to help this little sister of mine. No, it's because I want to have sex. That's the thing that keeps him going. Not keeping Nayuta safe, not giving her a good life, but sex. Not to mention the fact that Nayuta is literally an extension of the person that ruined Denji's life. That alone makes things extremely complicated between them. And some of y'all might say that, what about Asa? Maybe she could help. Again, I think some people overestimate how close Asa and Denji actually were. Asa and Denji didn't really meet that often throughout the part, and when they did, it was mostly story events. They weren't living in an apartment together, being with each other every single day, getting to know each other better and better. I do believe Asa and Denji's relationship was genuine, and I do believe there was something to be had. But to me, Asa and Denji's relationship isn't like Denji and Power or Denji and Aki. It's more akin to Denji and Reize. Connection was genuine. There could have been something, but it wasn't a familial, consistent relationship. It was more like a blooming friendship that could have been more. Not to mention that Asa also shares a body with the fucking villain, which brings the plot complications to another level. So, after all of this, Denji has nobody akin to Power and Aki. Nobody to help him overcome his addiction and find true connection. Who could actually help him? It's the one person that he sort of still has who does love him unconditionally. And that's Pochita. Pochita is the one being that since chapter 1, whilst not really being there, was the one true connection that Denji consistently had. And so he's the one who made the final choice to remove Denji's addiction. People say this ending was unsatisfying because the author removed Denji's agency, but his addiction overtook his life. He was so controlled by his impulses to the point where he really had no agency of his own. He had moments of clarity, but at the end of the day, his addiction controlled his life. And the only thing that could have possibly saved him was somebody who loved him taking the problem away, even if the problem was themselves. I think the most tragic thing about this ending is that Denji will never know the sacrifice that Pochita made. And Pochita knew this. He knew Denji would forget him. He knew everybody would forget him. And yet, he still made that choice because he loved Denji and he wanted him to be okay. Now, again, as I've said a million times in this video, I'm not gonna blame you if you don't like Chainsaw Man Part 2. Do I think that the discussion about it has become toxic? Yes, I 100% think it did. I'm not gonna be talking about it in this video since I think there's a broader picture of fandoms in general becoming insufferable, and I might just make a video about that. But yeah, if this story was important to you and you loved it and you feel like Part 2 betrayed it, I get it. And I feel for you, but at the end of the day, it is art. The author had a vision, he wanted to say something, and he wanted to say it in the most him way imaginable, regardless of what people would think or say. And I think that on its own is commendable. So yeah, bye.